keeping it wet and wild on a day like this, a month like this, we need the wet. And we also need the wild, we need the biodiversity. What I'm trying to show is that there's a link between biodiversity and ecosystem structure, and this will come out that when there is ecological integrity, then we have biodiversity of the coastal plain plants. Restoration and care of Nova Scotia's lakes. Next slide, please. And so the lake health starts upstream. Upstream, the cleaning starts, and I've just been texting Sean Hoyan, and he tells me that there are 55 if we're splitters, or 50 species of sagna in Nova Scotia. Reminds me of giving a talk in Kentucky where I generalized and said there's 25 species of oak, and it turned out to be 33. So down there it's oak trees. Here, a lot of the diversity is in the sagna, which are cleaning the waters. And this is one of the 50. This is Sagnum fuscum, and both of these species make up dens and bogs, and they've done so for 20 years. The sagna have filled in valleys, have slowed down water quality for our lakes. It goes for black spruce and tamarack, and running streams. Finally, we get the lake and the lake shore, and this is where this project is focusing. This is stone cabbage, and this is a wetland, and you can see that wetlands, yes, they really scrub the runoff into the lake, but even if it's not a wetland, the shoreline of a lake, here's the shoreline.
We're just having.
This is a wet shoreline, the shoreline. It is dry shoreline, and the point is that these shorelines have been put together over, we'll say, 300 million years. 300 million years ago, the shorelines were very different. The plants were very different. And then in that time, 300 million years, and you get woody plants, and you get insular plants, and the shrubs that we have today, leaves took on their appearance. They meandered, the banks were strengthened, and all of those woody plants are resisting erosion and filtering the nutrients that would otherwise go into this lake. So this is an Environment Climate Change Canada funded project, riparian restoration to reduce threats to Atlantic coastal plain flora species at risk in the Guestwick, Southwest Nova Scotia private place. And it's a Southwest Nova Biosphere Association project. And we'll be talking a lot about pond, so between the big pond hook and little pond. And this is one of the people that I'm working with now. This is Lori Walnut. 10 years ago, this is a meeting that we had with MTRI, with ECCC last year, and this is what the Pond Hook Campground is now looking like. Next, please. So, putting the shoreline together is key to protecting the Atlantic coastal plain plants. And a lot of us have been worried that we've been losing these shorelines, and that these shorelines have been cleared because of, usually for aesthetic reasons, want to have good visibility. But the message we have to get across is there's a new aesthetic, and the new aesthetic is function. The new aesthetic is saying we have restored the lakeshore pine trees, oaks, huckleberries, and we're doing this to reintroduce the structure that is going to keep that lake clean. And at the point of the Lakeshore Association.
Sorry, Nick, to interrupt you. We're just having some audio issues. People can't quite hear you on the online. So we just gotta
move the owl closer.
move the owl closer.
We'll see if that.
And so to protect the Atlantic Coastal Plain plants, ECC, ECCC, Environment Canada gave us a contract to restore the upper shoreline, put that structure back in place for biodiversity, but also to keep lakes healthy. And these are huckleberries, sweetgale, and switchgrass. We're growing all of these. That is, Acadia University is growing them. Mike Zifkin at LaHave Drumlin Nursery, and Wildcat Reserve right over yonder, and Rupert Yanish and I are all growing these plants. Next.
Sorry, it's still very faint. So. Press it all the way up. All the way up.
What's that?
Okay, we'll try that and see what that thing says.
Do you have a second laptop there? It'll just be nice to have the tech in the screen sharing on two screens too. Then we could be doing tech on one and right now. It'll be too much if we're near you. Yeah.
So go ahead and
there's a lot of literature out there saying that this dam structure, this dense woody blast is holding back sediments, taking up mineral nutrients, and it's also, as you guys know, a biodiversity hotspot. The lakeshore is a biodiversity hotspot. Thanks. And we can also look a whole watershed and start to plan whole watersheds. Start to plan where there's going to be different types of forestry, where there's going to be agriculture. What size of the riparian buffers do we need? These are all things we should be planning if we care about lakes and keeping them healthy for recreation. Next. All right. In terms of the Atlantic Coastal Plain plants, which, as you know, Nova Scotia has the lion's share in Canada, there are two watersheds that really stand out. There's the Mid Lake and the Tuscan. And these are infertile watersheds, and they support huge biodiversity of coastal plain plants. And the green areas are where we have the species at risk lakes. And you can see there's a huge green area in the middle of the Medway. There's bits of green which are really important tusket. And so we have to keep these lakes free flowing and clean. So we have to figure out damage into the coastal plain plants. These are indicators of lake health. We are propagating native shrubs and grasses to restore the lake shores, and I'm going to be dwelling on Pond Campground. And we have Nelson O'Driscoll, Ian Spooner, and Ben Hurley looking at the legacy impacts of gold mining. And as you know, there's gold mining in the North Shore of Pond Lake. And there's Summer and Ellie Good looking at the effects of lining for possible negative consequences of the Atlantic on the Atlantic coastal plain plants. So I first met the Womboats last year, and we'd gone for a paddle, we'd gone for a swim, and I was talking to Jason Womboat and talking about this project with Environment Canada and saying, we're really concerned with biodiversity, but our concern with biodiversity is also that the biodiversity is an indicator of ecosystem health. It's an indicator of water quality. And Jason said to me, if we don't have water quality, we don't have a business. And for 75 years, they've had this campground, about 200 units, RVs and that sort of thing. And over those 75 years, they've cultivated the campgrounds, but they didn't look at the soils. The soils were secondary. There was asbestos. In time, the Womboats started to realize that all was not right. The soils were run out. They were lacking in organic matter. There was erosion of sediments into the lake, and there was lack of vegetation in the shoreline buffer. So it's a perfect place to do what we set out to do. And this is an example of the runoff, which was coming from this little watershed here, coming off this hillside, all of the hardscape from the roofs of the campers, the roads, water it forms a torrent, goes down this driveway and cuts a little gully and goes into Pond Lake. So we decided to do something because, as you know, there was a specter of blue-green algae bloom in the Tuscan, and the Tuscan in the 1990s into 2010-ish, there was blue-green algae blooms that were coming from mink farms, and blue-green algae are a natural part of lakes, but they're going to be more and more because as temperature rises, the mineralization of that organic matter increases, nitrogen, phosphorus is coming off the peaks themselves. And so we have to reduce this. And so we get into this restoration, and it had many, many parts to it. There was design and planning, on the ground excavation, the soils were recontoured, organics were added, there was propagation of plants, planting, maintenance, this dry weather, science and documentation is coming, communication and outreach, and publications. And it involves a large number of organizations. Environment Climate Change Canada, Pond Lodge Campground, us, Yanish of Ironwood Farms is doing a lot of the soils work. Wildcat Reserve of Wasahoga is growing the plants, is maintaining the plants, and we're using them really as our central nursery. Canopy Design was a landscape designer, and Tara was designing, as you'll see, was designing a completely different landscape with ferns and garden and snow owl engineering. Thomas Chalmers was looking to see how this was going to work, how much water was going to come out, and what sort of dimensions we needed for the rain garden, how thick the sand. Acadia University and Harriet Durham Garden, Long Flats, Mike Zifkin, Lahave Nursery, Nova Scotia Department of Natural Resources, the regulator, but also a regulator who's very interested in how this is all going to play out. And Ian Manning is doing drone work for us at the Bridgewater campus of the NCC. So here's the rain garden that we designed to catch that stream. You saw that gully with all that potential sediment, real sediment going in. And this is what the piece of paper looked like at first. Tara Ralph designed this. And then this is Thomas Chalmers sort of looking around, trying to figure out where this is actually going to be. And this is Thomas in December, just looking over Little Pond Hook Lake. Little Pond Hook Lake is crystal clear. Unlike the big lake, Little Pond is crystal clear, it's groundwater fed. And as we find out, there's groundwater oozing from this shoreline that we were going to put the rain garden into this lake. Next. So this was an outline to inform Nova Scotia Nova Scotia Natural Resources Species and Risk Department, what we were doing, and to help them realize that we were going to take measures to make sure that we didn't impact the ribbon snakes, we didn't impact the monarchs, or we're going down into the lower shoreline where the rare plants. And here's the rain garden being built. We start off flat, plain. We start to put in plums. You can see why we're interested, swimming in the distance. And then the excavators. The excavator takes this down 3.5 feet. And this is afterwards when cobbles have been put in, sand has been put down, and we start to plant. Here again is Little Pond Hook, extremely clear water, crystal clear lake. And when we did the excavation, we hit water. And the water, this is the water that it's a couple of meters above the lake. So this is the importance that shorelines have this seep that issues out right where these rare plants are, right in the shoreline that we walk on in the summertime. And so we redid our calculations and didn't go below the 3.5 foot deep. So rain garden establishes, this is what it looked like, and here's what it looks like in July. And as you see, if you come tomorrow, we're hosting people at the campground, and we're gonna have trowels and plants, and you can help regreen this rain garden. This is the central stream. This is a pathway that was put above the rain garden, and it raised it up about 1 meter. And these are berms. Next, please. And I'll just play this video. Check on the shot. Here we go. There's the berms, recontouring of the landscape. This is before the rain garden gets vegetated. And all that sediment used to go into Pond Hook Lake. Now it's been diverted by a French drain into this rain garden. And there's irises, but if you come tomorrow at 10 o'clock tomorrow at Pond Hook Lodge Campground, can we do one more? There's one more video. No, should be another one. Thank you. If you come tomorrow, we can't promise you're going to see this, but you're going to be able to, as I say, regreen that rain garden and see how much it's changed. So this is the berm all around it. This is the filtration that happens, and all that sediment stays in place and doesn't go into the lake. Next. So these are some pictures of propagation. These are boxes containing huckleberry at Wildcat Reserve. This is a slat house where we grow plants that we don't want to get too hot and dry. Maria Roy started a huckleberry experiment, germination experiment. We're starting to crack the mystery of the huckleberry, how huckleberry seeds germinate, because we never see them germinate in nature. We see blueberries, but we've never seen this in nature. There's Maria and Emily and Sarah Adams planting the rain garden. Rupert Yanish and Kuma of Wildcat Reserve planting the rain garden. Next. So we're also interested in establishing vegetation on the shoreline. We've done the rain garden to trap all that sediment, nutrient, and this is what it looked like the shoreline when I first came. And there was a little bit of rose, but everything else you can see was eroded. The pine roots are bared. And this is what it looked like in 2025 in April. We put down these logs to hold the sediments that we added because we wanted more organic matter to actually root the huckleberry rocks. And this is what it's looking like. And this is why we're doing it. We're doing it so that we have habitat for snake, habitat for golden crest, for redroot, and rexia. This is a new bed, and we're improving huckleberries here. So everywhere we can, this is nice to see people enjoying the beach. You got to remember, there's 200 campground units that come here, and they're enjoying the beach, and we're able to send a message of this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing to improve the health of the lake. And as I say, we're trying to instill a new aesthetic that says, wow, look at this. We've regreened the shoreline. We've made these rain gardens. And kids are enjoying themselves right next to species of special concern. Next. So coastal plain plants are indicators of water health, and this is partly what makes Nova Scotia, Southwest Nova Scotia, yes, for a priority place. When you look at it, we have that no one else in Canada has. We have nationally rare plants. We've got globally rare plants, and they're growing on these two watersheds. They're also growing in the Midway, so like the Mersey, and through rivers. But these are our two stellar watersheds. So the next thing is looking at the impacts of gold mining. We're having a bit of a focus on Pond Hook Lake because Pond Hook Lake it is the start. It will say it's got a watershed area of about 130,000 hectares, something of that order. It's huge watershed area, and it's never been regulated. And so everything that's in thing about Plum Lake is special. There's black ash swamps on the North Shore. It's ringed by different species. Jeffy and I found ringtoss Westacea one, which is really cool. It's lovely. If you canoed it, you know it. You can get lost for a couple of days among the islands. But in the 1890s, there was gold mining there. There was gold mining there, and flotation used to mercury used to float the sediments. And it's the slide of Ian Gooley, who's working with Nelson and Driscoll and Spooner, and basically talking about the disposal of these mine tailings, which are very high in mercury, arsenic, and he's going to be looking at whether this mercury is getting into food webs and is being biomagnified. And this is him invertebrate sampling in the shallows. Next. And he's been taking sediment cores. He took one sediment core from 24 feet of water, and I just saw him and Ian Spooner cut that core in longitudinal sections or in longitudinal halves a couple of days ago. And so, yeah, he's doing stuff. Next. The other thing is the effect of liming on acid rain. We've got the Medway, and the Medway system that is very close to being good for salmon. The pH of the Medway is significantly higher than the Tuscan. When I was measuring pH way back, pH was about 4.3 sometimes in the Tuscan, and the same value in a place like Pond Lake would be fine. So it was hugely different. But still, because of acid rain, there's been a washing out of calcium and magnesium. And it's not so much that we still have acid rain, it's that the acid rain has washed out the calcium, washed out the magnesium from those cation exchange areas of the soil, and left us with very low alkalinity. So obviously, for salmon rivers, we're interested, conservation's interested in bringing back the salmon, but in doing that, we're jeopardizing the coastal plain plants, because coastal plain plants are notably much more diverse. Where is infertility? Are we making these shorelines inadvertently more fertile, and therefore there's going to be out competition of the species at risk? The coastal plain plants are going to get competed as biomass increases, because liming is good for everyone, but not for the little plants which can't compete. So this is Lagoon and Summer. They're working on that. Next. And this is a slide from Summer Carroll, and she's working on Second Christopher. We didn't want to work on anything that actually had rare plants. We wanted to sort of use the functional groups, look at what happens to poor competitors in the coastal plain flora. Also look at what happens to biodiversity. We're losing it. We're losing biodiversity on these shorelines when we're putting on line, or is everyone benefiting? Next. Taya, Lucas Desmond at Acadia with Alain and Brad are documenting whether there's been a loss of species at risk. As you know, in 2010, there was a lot of walking around, that was part of that, walking around these shorelines, looking at where the rare plants were, and then Brad and Ellen would also document where there've been impacts from cottaging. You put those two things together, and we should be able to figure out how much we've lost to cottage development, or rather, ill-informed cottage development. Not cottage development, but cottage development that is actually clearing the beaches. We think we've lost maybe upwards of 50% of the coastal plain plants to damming, hydroelectric damming, because the same habitats that are good for hydro are good for rare plants. You need high fluctuations where you have high winter levels and lower levels. I was just reading in Keji just now that the volume is 10 times more in winter in these rivers than it is in summer. So you go to a place like Pond Lake, and the drawdown is intense. Right now, if you come tomorrow at 10 o'clock on Friday, you will see a hugely drawn down system. And this is how you get that diversity. That as one goes down that summer shoreline, one's getting less and less growing season. And so you're getting more and more stress tolerant plants, less and less competition for rare plants that are globally and nationally rare. Next, please. And upcoming events, we're organizing a symposium. The date that we're shooting for is October 15th and 16th, from lake ecology to concern for the commons, multiple stresses to lake health and biodiversity, looking at all of the threats, trying to sort out which ones we should be most concerned with. Is it eutrophication? Is it loss of alkalinity? Is it land use, poor land use? Is it climate change? Is it climate change, which Ian Spooner has said we're going to get a tipping effect on some of these very shallow lakes. They're starting to fill in. And what we want from this is to distill in a non-scientific or non-scientist way, to distill the main threats and messages so that that can inform a workshop for municipalities on lakeshore function, restoration and regulations, coming up with some consensus for how we should manage and protect lakes and lake shores. Thank you. Oh, these are all the people about MTRI is involved in the whole project, us, also the First Nation, environment, climate change, and the funders. The province is the regulator, but is also very interested in what we're doing and in species at risk. Climate Lodge, Campground are making the whole thing that you saw possible. The Womble family, St. Mary's are doing the calcium study. Nova Scotia Sound Association linking in with that. Acadia, as we've said, Yanish, doing a absolutely invaluable, looking at the soils and figuring out the practicality of the restoration at Pond Lodge. Zipkins Mike is growing plants. He really is something. And if you haven't seen his little nursery in New Germany, you should see what he can do in a very small area. Southwest Paddlers, Tuscan River, and Harry Perkins. That's it.
Thank you, Nick. I think we can take questions online and in person if anybody has any questions. Who's clapping?
Well, there's more lakes, and there's more there's more shoreline there. So something that informed me way back when was I was looking at coastal plain plants and rare plants and trying to figure out why you got them on some lakes and why you didn't on the others. And after a long time, I realized that I had to take out the dammed lakes from my analysis. And then once I took out the lakes that had been dammed or were dammed, the result was that 66% of the variation in how many rare plants you had per lake on the shorelines could be accounted for by watershed area. And so these two river systems are huge. And so as you go down watershed, you're getting more and more force from flooding, more and more difference between high water and low water. And so you get a place like Pondhook, and it's extreme. You get a place, Pondhook in the Medway. You get a place like Wilson's Lake in the Tuscan, or Bennett's Lake. It is extreme. It can be 2 meters, 2 meter variation. So, easily it can be a 2 meter variation. And so this is where you're getting the low partition rates. And this is also where we're getting a big storage. There's a lot of storage, flood storage capacity. So these two river systems are spectacular. The Medway I like, and I'm not saying I don't like the Tuscan. The Medway I particularly like because if you saw that watershed map, Medway has the Gowan Lake and its tributaries, which are impacted by regulation. But that's it. The rest of the Medway is free flowing. So it would be possible one day to have totally free flowing Medway. That would be amazing. Now, the Tuscan, we could do that too, but that would be more work. But then again, Tuscan is where the nationally endangered plants, green coreopsis, pink coreopsis, and Plymouth gentian are both endangered. So that carries the weight. The Medway, we've got species of special concern. And we've got the Rhynchospora macrostachya that we both found on Malika Lake, I think. And we've got the ribbon snake, which is threatened. But in terms of just who's got the rarest, it's the Tuscan. So maybe we should be thinking of storing as much as we could the Tuscan and putting that under the microscope.